Hello guys, I'm Nathan, and in this video we'll be talking about constructors and method overloading. In this video we'll be talking about default constructors, parameterized constructors, method overloading, without method overloading, defining overloaded methods, and finally, invoking overloaded methods. So first, constructors. Constructors are a special method that constructs objects. However, unlike a method, it does not have a return value. Constructors can be used to initialize the fields in the object. The constructor is a necessary part of a class, and without it, no objects can be created out of it. Therefore, if you do not explicitly define the constructor, the compiler adds one for you. If the Java compiler adds a constructor to a class because the class does not contain a constructor, then the addition will be implicit and it will not be displayed in the source file. However, if there is already a constructor in the class, the compiler would not add another one. What are default constructors? A default constructor is a constructor created by the compiler when we do not define any constructors for the class. People sometimes confuse a default constructor for a no-argument constructor, but they are not the same. A no-argument constructor is a constructor that was made by the programmer and has no parameters. A default constructor is a constructor that was made by the compiler and not by the programmer. Therefore, a no-argument constructor cannot be a default constructor. What are parameterized constructors? A parameterized constructor is a constructor that accepts parameters. Parameterized constructors are built by the programmer and has one or more parameters. Parameterized constructors are different from no-argument constructors because they have parameters. In order to have a parameterized constructor, a programmer has to write their own. Here are some examples of constructors. The first picture is how to make a constructor. The second picture is a parameterized constructor. Here's another example of a constructor in a class. The second constructor is very useful in that it helps you write extra lines of code to initialize the object. With the second constructor, you can pass the values at the same time as when you create an object. The first constructor is a no-argument constructor. So next we'll be talking about overloading. Method overloading is a feature that allows a class to have more than one method having the same name, if their argument lists are different. In other words, method overloading allows you to have many methods with the same name, so that it improves the readability of a program. So say, when you name a method, you usually name the method for its purpose. For example, you want your method to print a string, so you name your method printString. However, you also want a method that prints only a part of a string, but you also want to name that method printString. This is possible because of a feature called overloading, where two methods can have the same name. However, each method has to accept different sets of argument types in order for it to be legal. Without method overloading, you have to name your method a different name, such as something like printPartString. So, without method overloading, there's a very simple way to not use method overloading. Just change the name of the method. However, this will make the code harder to read and can be confusing at times. Therefore, it will be harder to debug, maintain, and extend your code. Readability of your code is very important. So, defining and invoking an overloaded method is pretty much the same as defining and invoking a normal method. However, you need to remember to use the exact arguments so your code won't run a different method. In the first photo, we use an overloaded method and we define and invoke it. The first method is defined and invoked by the argument int a and int b, but in the second method we use double, but they both share the same name. This is because of overloading methods. In the second picture is the output of this class. So in this video, we covered the definition of constructors, how to differentiate different types of constructors, how to use constructors, definition or method overloading, the importance of method overloading, and readability in coding, and finally, how to define and invoke methods using method overloading.